It's another edition of the Vancouver Hockey Show, the VHS. Andrew Wadden here with producer Aaron. And you know what, Aaron? Remember last week when the Canucks earned those days off and we looked at the week that they had ahead and we're like, boy, couple of good opponents, especially the Colorado Avalanche. And
just
anytime,
2 games.
Just two games, exactly. And anytime Alex Ovechkin comes into town, it's always a good time. It's the Great Eight, one of the great players of his generation.
Oshie, 1,000 games.
Exactly. Oshie, 1,000 games for Washington. I thought that was pretty classy, but it didn't really work out all that well for the Canucks. And they go 0-1-1 Wednesday, as we rewind the week, with a 4-3 overtime loss to the Avs. And then Saturday night, a 2-1 loss, regulation at that, to the, I don't want to say lowly Washington Capitals. They're kind of a middle of the pack, sort of fringe playoff team in the NHL. That's a tough loss to swallow for the Canucks. But let's take it back to Wednesday.
Oh, boy.
Because everything was coming up Canucks. Everything was coming up Canucks early on in that game. Miller scores 24 seconds in. Mikheyev.
Oh, my God.
Mikheyev breaks his drought. What was it, 34 games? But then it starts to unravel for the Canucks. Kind of started around the Josh Manson, let's call it what it is, headshot on JT Miller. It's a legal check to the head is the terminology when it comes to the penalty by the NHL, but it's a headshot. And as you know, and as the listeners of this podcast know, I can't stand that stuff, and we got to get it out of the league. Josh
and
Manson
he also knew what he did the second.
Well, yeah, he knew it, but that's the thing. You can't just throw up your arms and be like, my bad.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't work that way. They have to be consistent with how they're calling these. Anyway, it's a little bit of a soapbox, but he got away with it.
Yeah, but 2 minutes, then JT had to go to the quiet room.
And he had to go to the quiet room, yeah. So then you lose JT Miller for your power play, which, by the way, has not been good. We're going to get into that a little bit later on. So yeah, that whole sequence there was just ridiculous. The Ian Cole hook on Nate McKinnon in the third that led to the 5-on-3 goal. In the third, or was it late in the second? Regardless, it led to it made it a 2-man advantage for the Avs. Terrible call. But it was one of those, star-driven calls, right? McKinnon does the with his hands, and then there's a hook all of a sudden. Regardless, I'm not making excuses for the Canucks, but the officials were bad in that game. Third period, though, absolute nightmare for the Canucks. And when you dive in under the hood, as we like to say, and take a look at the analytics, Colorado had the scoring chances in the third, Aaron, at 10-1. The Canucks didn't even get a high danger chance in the period. It was 6-0 for Colorado. 92% expected goals in the third period. And then, of course, the Carson Soucy puck over glass. That's a tough one to swallow, but it's a penalty. And that gave the Avs the opportunity that they needed. And ultimately, they get the power play goal and end up walking out of Vancouver with a very good win. And if you see the quotes, the post-game scrums from the Avs, they were excited about that win. They should be, right? The Canucks are the best team in the West. And the Avs came back from down 3 goals on the road to get that W.
We've talked about bad habits with the Canucks before, but I think
bad habits lead to
this is the
nights.
perfect analogy, I think, that I came up with the other day after watching that Colorado game.
Okay.
It's like when you have a friend over, you're just chilling out. It's a great time. You got something on, you're watching the game.
Okay.
And then you're like, oh, dude, check out that spider. And your friend freaks out.
Oh, is that?
And then they're just like, oh my God, spider, whoa. And they're like, yeah, I think that's what the Canucks do when it just starts slightly not going their way. Just freak out.
Panicky. And it sort of dovetailed into the Washington game as well, but let's just stick on Colorado for just a minute. And we are going to circle EP40 in this podcast as well, because he's been taking more shots than a lot of NHL goaltenders have these days. But let's just take a look at his line for that game. Aaron, the expected goals for the Pettersson, Suter, Hoglander line were 3.28%. Absolutely buried at 5-on-5 versus the Colorado Avalanche. And what do we got left here? 14 games before the regular season wraps. And there's the regular season in the NHL, then there's the postseason. And for some reason, the officiating changes, the games get tougher, And when you see an opponent like Colorado, who they very likely could face, or an opponent as good as Colorado, because there's a bunch of them in the West, that's a concerning stat when you look at the Pettersson line. But let's move on, though, because we'll get to PD in just a minute.
Let's just wrap that up by saying Colorado takes the season versus Canucks.
Oh, yeah.
3-0.
Hey, man, the Avs are good. I was talking to a buddy about it today. Connor McDavid's the best player on the planet. I'm not going to argue that. He's quite possibly the best hockey player I've ever seen in my life. And I grew up watching Gretzky. 1984, I'm 6 years old watching Gretzky, right? But Nate McKinnon is, and I my old podcast partner, Jeff Patterson, used to describe him as this. He's a predator on the ice. I love that. I love that. He is a predator on the ice. And the thing about him is, like, when he needs to dig in, I love Nate Dogg. I love that Colorado team. I think they did some fantastic stuff at the trade deadline as well. We did talk about that already. Let's focus in here, though. This is still a Canucks podcast. So we move on to Saturday night. The grade 8's in town. We love it when Ovi's in town. Now, Ovi's not quite the player that he used to be, and it seems to be falling off quickly for the grade 8. But let's keep in mind, he had the game-winning goal in this game. But he was down early. The Canucks did it again. They scored 71 seconds into the game. But then what happened after that? They went MIA. The second period was a complete meltdown from the Canucks. Washington scores, 2 in 2 minutes, something like that. The Canucks had a power play opportunity in the third, though, and they couldn't convert on it. And then they ended up losing the game 2-1 in regulation. So, as mentioned, they go 0-1-1. But if you look at that power play opportunity they had in the third against Washington that they weren't able to convert, they also had the same opportunity against Colorado in the third that they couldn't convert on as well. So that leads us to this power play that is absolutely awful right now. And they got to figure this out because they are on the longest homestand, or second longest homestand in club history right now with 9 straight. But that power play has been absolutely in the gutter since the All-Star break, one of the worst in the league. So they're going to have to figure that out. Also, since the All-Star break, they are 9-7-3. So they're technically a losing team. That 3, although they're 3 points, those are 3 losses still, right? And once we get into the postseason, there's clearly not any 3-on-3 overtime or shootout or any of that hokey stuff that the NHL has introduced into the league. But they are really going to have to pick it up here. And, you want to make hay when you're at home. The good news, though, about this, the 3 opponents in the week coming up are all out of the postseason. Buffalo on Tuesday, Montreal Thursday, Calgary Saturday. Buffalo's kind of had one of those they had a little spurt there where they started to flirt with the idea that perhaps they could get themselves into a wild card spot. It ain't happening. I'm sorry. Montreal's Montreal. We know where they're at. And Calgary has sold off everybody outside of Jacob Markstrom.
Andrei Kuzmenko return night.
But the following week after that, they'll see the Kings, the Stars, and the Ducks. And that will wrap up that homestand. So 6 games left, if my math is correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. You got to make hay when you're at home. And this is not the start that the Canucks wanted. All right, let's dive into some of the problems and stories around the Canucks this week. And I said problems first because I want to look at Lindholm and Elias Pettersson. Elias and Elias and their struggles. Lindholm has 7 points in 19 games as a Canuck. He went from a 0.65 points per game this season with Calgary to a 0.37 with Vancouver. No goals, 2 assists, last 13 games. Not good. PD has been struggling as well. The power play, as I mentioned, has just been awful since the All-Star break. I'm starting to wonder if perhaps Canucks management is wondering if they pulled the trigger too fast and got the wrong player. I have defended Elias Lindholm, his defensive plays. I mean, maybe there's more to the game than just, the counting stats. But at the same time, too, let's not kid ourselves. That's what they brought him in here for, right? They wanted to add to the offense, add to the power play, just make that team that was one of the highest scoring, if not the highest scoring team in the NHL, that much more powerful. Hasn't been the case. If you're Elias Lindholm, though, Aaron, and you're in Vancouver now, and yeah, sure, things started off well. You had those 2 goals in your first game. Now you're on the third line. and you're playing with essentially a rookie in Vasily Podkolzin. I know he's got a season under his belt, but he's basically in sort of rookie form still in terms of his learning around the league. And Connor Garland, who's been great, they don't seem to have formed any chemistry together. And I know Garland talked about the fact that he misses his buddy Dakota Joshua right now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you heard his quotes saying, yeah, I know where Dakota is. I have to think about it. I mean, it's going to be tough. Like, you're putting three guys together that never have played together. So I get that. But you'd think that Elias Lindholm could kind of elevate these guys. Like, this is why you brought him in. So now I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, I know I did the video a while ago. I mean, like, we got to keep in mind here, like, Lindholm's been here since the start of February. Like, they got their work done early when it came to him. And I know when the rumors were going around about Lindholm, about, whether he was going to be available he was going to be available. We knew that. But whether the Canucks were going to be involved, I stated the case that I thought Lindholm was the right fit over someone like Jake Guentzel. Now, my argument back then was, what is Pittsburgh going to do? Like, they're really going to sell this player, one of their best young-ish type players? He's still in his 20s, late 20s at that. But I wondered, are they going to move this guy? And then at that time, too, Pittsburgh didn't know what they were doing with their season. But then come trade deadline, it was clear that it was time to, sort of get into the rebuild mode, if you will, with Pittsburgh. And that's when Guentzel became available. And then the Canucks are sitting there going, we don't have the pieces, nor do we have the cap space. And ain't nobody in the league going to help you get better, right? Especially when you're the best team in the league already. The fact that they weren't able to get Guentzel, it doesn't surprise me at all. But the fact that, I shouldn't even say the fact that, the matter of them sort of rethinking it, going, maybe we would have been better off getting Jake Guentzel, who is a proven goal scorer. And again, going back to Elias Lindholm, like, now you're on a third line in Vancouver. Like, you're probably sitting around going, like, what the hell is going on here? So I am sort of curious to how this is going to work out for Lindholm as he moves forward, and maybe this team gets it back together. Like, there's one thing we do need to keep in mind. Like, the Vancouver fan base is, once the sky starts falling, they just get all out of sorts.
Spider.
Yeah, there you go, spider. Exactly. Go back to your analogy there. But let's keep in mind, like, they haven't had a lot of struggles this year. Like, this is one of the toughest adversity that they've had to face so far this year. So there is that, but the timing, it's not so great right now for the Vancouver Canucks. Speaking of timing, by the way, and Garland, he got into a tussle with Filip Hronek on Thursday at practice. And Garland came out afterwards and said, listen, like, it's nothing. These are battle drills. These sort of things happen, et cetera, et cetera. But it shows you that the frustration is starting to mount here with this team. We heard it from the head coach after Saturday's loss to Washington, and he's basically, calling them out at this point and calling out his star players. And we mentioned Petey.
We also heard it on the rink mic during hockey night when one of the Caps players said to Hoglander, why are you so angry?
There you go. Exactly. So this tussle between Hronek and Garland, I don't think anything of it at all. These are the kind of things that happen amongst teammates. I mean, you're battling with each other and that happens. And let's keep in mind, too, like, Garland and Dakota Joshua got into it, at training camp? And look at where their relationship's at nowadays. Garland is lost without him. So that sort of thing, I know.
Maybe this is the start of a good friendship.
Yeah, could be. Could be. Maybe this is what, maybe they're like best friends after this, right? But again, this just shows you that the frustrations are starting to mount a little bit here for the Vancouver Canucks. And I mean, that can't be a good thing, especially when you're 14 games away. Your first official postseason in many years. We know Demko's week to week. We know about the injury. Our buddy Farhan Lalji was reporting that it was going to be 2 to 3 weeks expected. That was almost a week ago now. So we'll keep our eye on that. Already stated on this podcast how important I think that Thatcher Demko is to them having any sort of success in the playoffs. I'm not taking away anything from Casey DeSmith, but let's be honest, Casey DeSmith is not at the level of Thatcher Demko. Aaron, if he needs to take this entire time off before the postseason, I'd be okay with it. I know some people would be like, no, you want to get him in a game or two. Yeah, obviously I agree with that. But at the same time, too, I am not taking any risks whatsoever when it comes to Demko. Like, I want him in bubble wrap right now, right? was the bubble boy?
One of those zero gravity chairs. Like, yeah.
Exactly. Like, protect Demko at all costs right now. But also, too, though, and, you know, Garland is missing his buddy Dakota Joshua. Dakota Joshua has moved to long-term injured reserve. So it's going to be a while before we're going to get to see Dakota Joshua. And I'm hoping we're going to get to see him again. You know, I don't know where the injury's at the moment. And as we know with NHL injuries, they're always so hush-hush with everything. But it's crazy to think how important he has been to this team because when you look at them recently, like, yeah, you know, JT Miller's going to step up. You know, Brock Besser's going to step up. Like, that line has been essentially carrying the team. And let's give Ilya Mikheyev some kudos as well, because for as much as we ragged on him during that goalless drought, I mean, he snapped it. So let's see if he can continue to do good things. But when you've got Petey's line sputtering, and then you got that third line that was like the engine for the Canucks for a little while there, and they're all out of sorts now because it's not even, I mean, only 1/3 of the line is there now with Garland. So it's crazy to think how important Dakota Joshua is to this team. But boy, do they need him back, and they need some depth scoring big time. Probably could have used Jake Gensel. I'm not going to go back to that again. Some other news that has come out around the Canucks this week. Ryan Johnson, the GM of the Abbotsford Canucks, has been promoted to AGM. He's going to be with Emily Castengay and, of course, with Cami Granato. So congratulations to Ryan Johnson. Ryan Johnson just seems like one of those guys that is just destined for, I don't want to say stardom in the NHL when it comes to management, but he's destined to, you know, climb the ranks. And he's done that right now going into the AGM position. I wonder if he's being groomed to be the next GM. Now, I'm not getting away from Patrick Allvin at all, and Patrick Allvin is still a relatively young man, but I'm just wondering if that's, you know, where Johnson
you need to have
sort
a
of
long-term plan, man.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not like Jim Rutherford's going to be around forever.
No.
And if you're Patrick Allvin, you're probably like, yeah, you know, president does sound a little, or president of hockey operations does sound a little more prestigious than just being a GM. So anyway, we're getting way too far ahead of ourselves, but congratulations to Ryan Johnson. And again, just from what the Canucks management used to be to what it is now, it's unbelievable. Like, it's legitimately night and day. Elias Pettersson, I don't know if you heard about this. He's headed to Abbotsford. Did you know about that?
No.
Well, it's the defenseman, though.
Oh.
Pettersson. The 3rd round pick of the Canucks.
Elias Pettersson.
Right?
Peterson.
We got to figure out a way to separate these two. People are doing the D-Petey thing. I don't know if you're the defenseman, Elias Pettersson. I don't know if you want to be called D-Petey. It's a weird nickname. What should we call him? Elias Pettersson? Like, it would probably work out better for him. Anyway, he's a 6'2" defenseman. He's a left shot guy. He was 2022 3rd round pick. Obviously, we're only really talking about him because of the name being the same as the Canucks star. But at the same time, too, there's some people that follow, you know, draft prospects and, you know, guys that are climbing through the ranks that say this kid's got a shot. So we'll keep an eye on him down at Abbotsford. He comes over from Orebro, which is the same program that Jonathan Lecara-Mackey's in. I don't think that DPD was playing exactly for Orebro at the moment. To be honest with you, I don't know. We'll let the prospects people dig that up. But I am interested to keep an eye on that kid and see what he does for the Abbotsford Canucks. All right, as mentioned, bit of a soft week ahead, but at the same time, this is maybe exactly what the Canucks needed with Buffalo, Montreal, and Calgary coming to town this week. So we'll keep an eye, of course, on how the Canucks hold up against, you know, 3 opponents that they should get 3 W's over. But at the same time, too, I think big focus this week is Elias Pettersson and Elias Lindholm and seeing where their production goes. Hey, 3 teams that are essentially not bottom feed. Montreal is one of the bottom feeders of the league, but 3 teams that you should be able to have success against. Let's see if Elias and Elias can pull themselves out of the hole that they're currently in, and let's see if the Canucks.
I think they just need to remember the alternative unofficial season slogan that S. Brown 1953 suggested on YouTube last night.
Oh,
on our highlights packages.
Yes.
Don't get officiated.
Don't get officiated. If you're wondering what the hell we're talking about, we do those MXC mashup alternative highlights. Many thanks to Vic and Kenny. Those guys have been fantastic for us this year. But the slogan of the year, and of course MXC, is, well, don't get eliminated, right? But the last couple of games, that commenter on YouTube was absolutely right. Don't get officiated. But don't allow the officiating to be that as well, right? Like, take control of these games and finish them. Like you did against Colorado when you didn't finish. And like you did against Washington when you basically disappeared after getting the first tally of the game. So we'll be looking forward to that this week, see if the Canucks can pull themselves off the mat. But what we do know, Aaron, is that this team is headed to the postseason. Let's just see if they can maintain that spot atop the Pacific Division. All right. For producer Aaron, I'm Andrew Wadden. This has been another edition of the Vancouver Hockey Show. Thanks for listening, everyone.